"Shut up, human, and get in bed with me, or we'll freeze to death." She had no choice. High above, under the leaden sky, snowflakes fell like silent blades. The world below was white, dense, and quiet. A frozen expanse hiding secrets buried for millennia. And one of them had just awakened. Ethan Monroe had always preferred isolation. A former soldier turned survivalist by choice, he'd built his cabin more than 20 miles from the nearest town. Out there, among ancient trees and frozen rivers, he felt whole again. Away from war, away from questions, away from people. But that morning, something not of this earth streaked silently across the sky and crashed just a couple of kilometers from his land. A bluish flash lit up the horizon for a split second, but it was the dull, thudding boom that had pulled him from bed before dawn. He threw on his thermal jacket, grabbed his rifle, laced his boots, and set out. No one answered on the shortwave radio, but he knew that hadn't been a meteor. The impact was far too gentle, almost controlled. As he neared the clearing he'd known since his bear-tracking days, Ethan froze. The ground was scorched. The snow had melted in a 30-meter radius, exposing black, smoking soil. In the center stood a metallic structure, round, smooth, and impossible to identify. And lying beside it, half buried in steam and ice, was a humanoid figure. He held his breath. Her skin was a deep, shimmering violet, like a wet amethyst. Her hair, as white as the snow itself, spread across her shoulder like silver silk. She was alive. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but her lips, a dark purple, were trembling. She was barefoot and completely naked. Ethan hesitated. Her fingers were jointed in strange ways. Her legs, long and muscular, ended in feet far too elongated to be human. But there was something in her, a trace in her face, maybe her half-lidded eyes, that evoked an ancient kind of beauty, like a painting come to life. "Shit," he muttered, taking off his coat without thinking. Her eyes snapped open, vertical pupils, lavender irises, a hostile glint. "Don't touch me, human." Her voice was rough, low, and yet it cut through the icy air like a blade. "I still have enough strength to tear out your throat. You'll freeze to death if you stay here," Ethan said, keeping his hands visible. "I've got a cabin, a generator, heat, food, clothes. I won't hurt you." She blinked slowly, calculating. But whatever was keeping her alive was fading. "You're alone. Always." Silence. Then she tried to stand and collapsed her knees, gasping. Ethan rushed forward and caught her before she hit the snow. This time, she didn't resist, but she mumbled something in a language he didn't understand. Then, in a soft voice, "If you take me, and I wake up chained, I'll snap your spine." "Fair enough," he said. The cabin was small but solid. Insulated, reinforced wooden walls, a fireplace, and a gas generator that kept it at a cozy 68 degrees Fahrenheit, even in a storm. He laid her in the bed, the only one. Hours later, when he woke beside her, listening to the wind howling outside, everything was quiet. But then, "Shut up, human." Her voice rang out, desperate, almost a growl. "We're freezing. Get in my bed now." Still groggy, Ethan turned. She was trembling, teeth chattering. Despite the warm cabin, her body clearly couldn't retain heat like a human's. "The generator's still working," he said, confused. "It doesn't matter. Your species, you radiate heat," she snapped, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. "Now, Monroe, or I'll die." She knew his name, and in that moment, surrounded by snow and silence, the warmth came. Not from the fireplace, but from her touch, from the danger of being so close to something he didn't understand, and the undeniable truth that nothing, absolutely nothing, in that forest was more dangerous than lying down in that bed. The night wore on with a heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of wind brushing against the wooden windows. Ethan lay at the edge of the bed, tense, as if on watch. The alien woman curled up against him, arms wrapped around herself, like she wanted to disappear into the heat radiating from his body. Despite the situation, his instinct screamed that she wasn't defenseless. The way she controlled her breathing, her muscles still taut despite her weakness, and her eyes, always alert, even when blinking, spoke louder than any verbal threat. "Got a name?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away, just squeezed her eyes shut, like speaking caused pain. "My name can't be pronounced in your language," she said finally. "But you always try. Let me try." She turned her face toward him in the shadows. Her white hair slipped across the pillow with an almost ethereal shimmer. "Meliara, Meliara," he repeated. "Beautiful. In my language, it means the one who no longer belongs." By morning, she was already up. Ethan found her standing in front of the mirror in the makeshift bathroom, wearing an oversized thermal shirt and sweatpants he had to cut to fit her long legs. Her purple skin stood out starkly against the fabric, but she moved with dignity, like a fallen queen. "Do you have anything that works as food?" she asked without looking at him. He pointed to the counter. "Cans, protein powder, MREs. Nothing fancy, but it gets the job done." She opened a can of meat, sniffed it, and made a face. "This isn't food. It's survival." She swallowed hard and ate like she was chewing rust. On the third night, the heat went out. The generator coughed twice and died, overwhelmed by a cold more extreme than anything he'd ever faced. Ethan tried to restart it, but realized part of the external piping had frozen, something that should have been impossible with the insulation he'd installed. "This is impossible," he muttered, stepping back inside. "Not with that kind of insulation. Not at -30. "It's not your shelter's fault," Meliara said, wrapped tightly in a blanket. "It's me." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "My people. My ship still emits thermal shielding radiation. It's affecting the microclimate. You've noticed, haven't you? The forest is quieter." He had noticed. No crows. No foxes. Not even the wind through the trees. Just a silence that sank into your bones. "We're in an inverted thermal isolation field," she continued. "The air here gets denser, colder, but it doesn't spread beyond 500 meters. That's why no one has detected my crash. I'm hidden, even from temperature." "You're saying you're freezing everything around us?" She nodded, weary. "And if it keeps going, your cabin will become a tomb." That night, they slept wrapped around each other without speaking. Not out of desire, out of necessity. But Ethan felt the moment her body stopped trembling. And later, the moment she looked at him in the dark with an expression that was no longer fear, but calculation. "You didn't bring me here just to help," he said the next morning, while making coffee. "No, I brought you here because I couldn't die. Not yet. And now." She stepped closer, her face serious, skin cold, eyes like twin lilac moons. "Now, you're gonna help me get out of here alive, or you die with me." The storm had moved past warning level. Now it was survival. The cold was pushing the limits of what should be physically possible. Ethan ran trembling fingers over the dismantled generator panel, his breath escaping in thick clouds. "If we don't restore central heat in 48 hours, the pipes freeze. After that, it's the blood," he said, without turning to her. Meliara stood at the window. The forest was still. Snow piled up in natural walls around the cabin. It felt like they were trapped inside a white cocoon. "I warned you," she said. "I'm not trying to kill you, but what I am kills by proximity." Ethan leaned back against the wall and slid to the floor. Exhausted. "What exactly are you?" She hesitated, then stepped closer, slowly, like crossing a line she'd sworn never to cross. "I was part of a dimensional correction unit, an elite squad, but I disobeyed orders and was marked as divergent. Exiled, and they dumped you on Earth." "No, I chose to fall here. Because humans, you're unstable, but creative, adaptable. I needed a chance to rewrite my biology, to survive outside what my people consider genetic purity." She stopped right in front of him. "But my body can't endure your environment without adjustments. And you, Ethan Monroe, are the adjustment." He stared at her, jaw slack. "What are you saying?" "That you're compatible. Your heat, your bioelectric field, your touch, your proximity stabilizes my body. Like I'm some kind of portable charger." She smiled for the first time. A cold smile. A bit more intimate than that. But yes. Hours later, he woke up with her lying next to him again, naked. The temperature in the room was brutally low. Even under the blankets, his muscles ached from the cold. But her body was warm. Her violet skin shimmered faintly under the dim light. "This is insane," he said, panting. "And yet, you're alive." He was about to fire back something sarcastic, but stopped. Her breathing was calm. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Controlled. She'd found balance. Because of him. On the third day, without the generator, Ethan found his dog, Bear, frozen outside the front door. He must have slipped out during the night, maybe drawn by something, and hadn't come back. The grief hit like an axe. Bear had been the last piece of his old life. The only living soul who understood him without words. Meliara said nothing while he dug a grave in the hardened snow. When he finished, covered in sweat and ice, she approached. "I'm sorry." "No, you're sorry you lost a resource. I lost my only friend." "You're wrong." She bowed her head. Then, softly, "I had a brother. He was erased because he refused elimination orders. I reported him. To survive." Ethan looked at her. For the first time, there were cracks in her armor. "You hate yourself for it. Every day." He nodded, then said, "Welcome to the club." That night, she lay closer. This time, she didn't ask. "Ethan, yeah. You haven't asked what my people would do if they found out you helped me. What would they do?" She took her time. "They'd wipe you out. And everything within 50 kilometers. As a precaution, silence. So that's it. If I save you, they kill me. If I don't, you die. And the planet could be detected," she added. "The radiation from the crash has likely already triggered noise and containment sensors. Is there a way to stop it?" She turned slowly, white hair spilling down her chest, eyes like some alien sunrise. "There's one, but I won't ask you to do it. Meliara, physically bonding with me accelerates adaptation, but it erases your previous genetic signature. You'd stop being a normal human. What would I become?" She took a deep breath. "Someone like me, a biological exile. Forever." Ethan went quiet. Then he laughed. "Just once. So basically, sex or extinction. Not sex. Fusion. Bonding. Mutation. But with physical contact." She nodded. "It doesn't have to be now. But if you choose it, know there's no going back." He looked toward the window. Snow was falling. The world outside was shrinking. And in the middle of that collapsing white silence, the only thing alive still pulsing beside him was her. None of it made sense, except the heat from that inhuman body, and the certainty that he was already far more involved than he wanted to admit. The radio crackled for the first time in days. Ethan rushed to it, turning the dial with trembling fingers. NWS. Repeat. Abnormal temperature drop detected in isolated northern Tongass sector. Possible unidentified substance leak. Evacuation recommended. The voice dissolved into static. He turned to Meliara. She was already there, standing still, like she'd sensed the warning before it even hit the air. "They're coming," she said. "The government. Yours and maybe mine." The tension sliced through the air. Ethan was stuffing packs with only the essentials. He knew they wouldn't get far, but staying meant death or capture. Maybe both. Meliara watched him in silence, as if seeing him for the last time. "There's something you haven't told me," he said, yanking the zipper closed. She nodded. "I left a locator active in the pod. I was too injured to shut it down. They know where I am now. They didn't before, but they do now." "What?" "Because my kind doesn't believe in exile, only in discrete elimination. So they're not coming to rescue you. They're coming to erase me." Ethan took a deep breath. "Then we have no choice. We hide. There are caves east of here, up near the ridge." Meliara crossed her arms, restless. "You don't understand, Ethan. Even if we escape, I won't make it. My body's already begun the process. I'm fusing with your biological signature, but it's too slow. It hurts. It's failing. How do I speed it up?" She didn't answer. She just stared at him for a long time. The decision wasn't romantic. It wasn't poetic. It was raw. On the last night, before they ran, Ethan entered the room. She was already there, sitting on the thin mattress, white hair loose, body wrapped in one of the thermal blankets. But her eyes were clouded. "If you go through with this," she said bluntly, "you'll never be the same. Your body will carry fragments of my code. Your mind too." He stepped closer, slowly. "And if I don't?" She lowered her gaze. "I die. And do you want to live?" A pause. Then she said, "For the first time, yes." What followed was quiet. There were no urgent kisses. No rush. just the sound of two bodies moving toward each other, carefully, fearfully, reverently. Her skin was cold at first, then it began to warm, and then it burned. But he didn't pull away. She trembled, not from the cold, but from something he couldn't name. A kind of emotional vertigo that challenged her mission, her beliefs, everything she'd been taught about lesser species. When their bodies touched fully, the world stopped. There was light, literally. A subtle pulse, like an inner aurora, shimmered across Meliara's violet skin and spread into him, as if something was rewriting itself beneath their flesh. He gasped. She cried out. For a second, her eyes turned pure white, and then silence. They lay there, breathless, hands still intertwined. But something had changed. In the skin, in the blood, in the space between them. Ethan opened his eyes. She was staring at him, astonished. It worked, she whispered. You didn't die. Neither did you. She leaned her forehead against his. We're connected now. Outside, the wind stopped. But far above, in silent orbit, a signal lit up. And a ship not of this earth answered, turning into a deadly arc. They were coming. Fast. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, subscribe to the channel. There's more where that came from. Because sometimes, the only thing standing between the end of the world and a new beginning is a choice you never thought you'd make. After the turning point, the characters must face the real consequences. Pain, changes, pursuit, loss, or dangerous truths. The romance deepens, but so does the danger. The next morning dawned with blood in the sky. The clouds had turned a grayish scarlet, casting an eerie glow over the frozen forest. Ethan woke with his muscles pulsing, like they were being rebuilt from the inside. His skin burned, not from fever, but from something deeper, like his body was trying to rewrite its own instruction manual. Meliara sat quietly at the edge of the bed, blankets slipping from her shoulders. It's starting, she said. He sat up breathless. This isn't just symbolic bonding. She nodded. Your immune system is trying to understand what it can't fight. It's starting to accept my coding. Soon, parts of you will no longer be human, genetically speaking, but you'll still be you. New body, old soul, something like that. He looked down at his hands. The veins were darker. The tips of his fingers had a faint bluish glow, flickering in and out like will-o'-the-wisps. How long until this ends? It never fully does. While Ethan buried more supplies in the snow for the escape, he heard the sound. Subtle. Not wind. Not an animal. Synthetic. He ran to the highest point in the clearing and lifted his binoculars. Across the white horizon, 3 figures moved in a triangular formation. They left no footprints. Even at a distance, something about their motion, too smooth, too perfect, felt wrong. Meliara, he said, rushing back inside. They're here. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath. They won't talk. They'll identify and fire. If they hit with a dispersal pulse, not even a cell remains. Then we run. Now, it won't matter. The radiation I emit left a trail. They know exactly where I am. They just don't want a scene. They'll make it look like a natural event. An avalanche, maybe. Ethan leaned against the wall. Adrenaline begged him to act, but his new body was beginning to respond differently. He could feel Meliara's heartbeat, even from across the room, pulsing in his bones. Is there anything I can do? She stepped closer, took his face gently in her hands. There was warmth now, and a tenderness she'd never shown before. You already did. You gave me time. And if I'm going to die, at least I'll die whole. No one's dying. Not here. Not today. In the next hour, Ethan dug out an escape tunnel beneath the cabin. The old firewood storage shaft had been reinforced with boards and scrap metal. It was narrow, claustrophobic, but it led straight into the forest, just behind a rocky outcrop. When they come in, we go through there, straight to the frozen riverbed. And after that, I've got a hidden shelter in an abandoned mine, 30 minutes out. If we make it, we might have one more shot. By late afternoon, the figures reached the door. Ethan and Meliara lay under the false floor, hands clasped. His body trembled, not from fear, but from a mutation spreading through him like a living fever. You're bleeding, she said, touching the side of his neck. He wiped the dark blue blood away with the back of his hand. Yeah, I noticed. Above them, the wood creaked. Footsteps, soft, precise. Then a dull sound. Then silence. And then, boom, the entire cabin shook. The back wall gave out with a thunderous crack, and for a moment the world was buried under the roar of collapsing snow. Ethan yanked Meliara by the hand, and they bolted through the tunnel. Heat from the blast and the scent of melted plasma followed close behind. But they made it out. The forest swallowed them. Hours later, at the mouth of the mine, Ethan collapsed to his knees. His body pulsed with light in scattered bursts. His sweat glowed blue. His vision flickered between too sharp and too distorted. Ethan. Meliara caught him as he staggered, hands to his face, breath ragged. It hurts, he gasped. But it's also like, I can hear you. Inside. She leaned in, touching her forehead to his. Because now, you're part of me. And I'm part of you. Silence. Then she whispered, they won't separate us. Not the cold. Not Earth. Not my people. Far above, in the silent orbit, the triangular ship armed its second strike. But what it didn't know was that something new had just been born in that forgotten shelter. Something its calculations never predicted. The mine's shelter was cramped, damp, and dark, but it was dry, camouflaged, and for now safe. Ethan activated the small solar panel hidden among the rocks and flicked on the single LED lamp. The light lit up the carved, time-worn walls, and the two dirty, breathless bodies slumped side by side. Meliara stared at him, unblinking. Her lilac eyes still shimmered with the residual glow of the mutation. Your heartbeat is slowing down, she whispered. Your body's syncing with mine. That shouldn't be possible. Ethan was breathing heavily. I've never been great at doing what's supposed to be possible. She let out a short, humorless laugh. You have no idea what you've done. Or maybe you do, and still chose it. He turned his face to her. Even exhausted, his voice was steady. I chose you. That's all that matters now. That night, neither of them slept. The shelter was cold, despite the insulation. But the heat between them, this time, not just physical, filled the space like a silent promise. Meliara sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the stone wall. Do you want to know the real reason I ran? Ethan nodded. My people were engineered to be perfect, genetically defined. No room for error, unnecessary emotion, or weak connections. We don't love. We love efficiency. We love function. She dug her fingers in her arms. But I felt something. For someone. A shield mate. It was forbidden. Almost heresy. When they found out, he vanished. I was labeled unstable. The worst kind of defect. They killed him. Maybe. Or reconditioned him. Either way, he wasn't him anymore. So I ran. Took a dispersion pod and aimed for the least probable planet. A chaotic, unruly, filthy place, human. She looked at him. I thought I'd die here, meaningless. But then I found you. Ethan listened quietly, then said softly, I was running too. She frowned. From the war. No, from myself. From whatever was left of me when it ended. I saw my friends die every night. I saw the face of the kid I couldn't save in the bombing. When I came back, the world moved on. I couldn't. She leaned in and rested her chin on his shoulder. And now, he turned and pressed his forehead to hers. Now, for the first time, I don't feel like I'm drowning. That day, they built makeshift defenses at the mine's entrance. Meliara showed him how to use small energy dispersion crystals salvaged from the wrecked pod. And together, they created invisible traps for anything that got too close. But they also started building something else. A code. A way to survive not just the attack, but each other. That night, the mutation in Ethan stabilized. His eyes now shimmered iridescent under certain lights. His skin, still human, seemed more resistant to the cold. And his senses had sharpened. He could feel sounds through his bones before hearing them. Meliara checked his pulse. Scanned. Rescanned. You are perfect. He smirked. So now you're taking me back to your ship and selling me off as a genetic experiment. She scoffed but smiled. No, now I get to call you an equal. Silence. Then she said, Ethan, no matter what comes next, when they arrive, I want you to know, if I have to choose between my species and you. He cut her off. You already did. And he kissed her. This time, not out of necessity, not out of desperation, but because something inside them, human or not, needed it to stay alive. Dawn came heavy with silence, but it wasn't natural silence. It was the kind that comes before something breaks. The kind hunters wear like armor before they strike. Meliara woke first. Her body twitched with involuntary micro-adjustments, a response to the presence of others like her. They were close. Too close. "Ethan," she whispered, shaking him. "They're here." He shot up, eyes already adjusting to the dark. "Which way?" She didn't need to answer. The cave ceiling rumbled. Shards of stone dropped, and a violet beam sliced down through the entrance like a vertical blade. It wasn't heat. It was raw energy. They were here. The first ones had humanoid forms, but they weren't like Meliara. Their skin was black as deep space, their eyes dull and lifeless, and their bodies emitted an unbearable vibration, like reality itself was rejecting their presence. Ethan raised the improvised weapon made from her ship's crystals. "Stay behind me," he said. But Meliara yanked his arm with surprising strength. "No, they came for me. I'll handle them. Alone, you wouldn't survive a second of their pulse." One of the intruders spoke in a language that sounded like glass shattering inside his skull. Meliara replied, just as coldly. But unlike them, she was crying. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a potential massacre. The aliens unleashed a pulse, a blast of silence that bent the air. Ethan was thrown against the cave wall, blood trickling from his mouth. His skin glowed, trying to adapt, to resist. But it wasn't enough. "Ethan!" she screamed, charging forward without thinking. One of the soldiers aimed at her. Its arm opened in four, revealing an organic weapon shaped like a black spike. It fired, and she threw herself in front of him. There was no sound, but the purple blood that spilled on the ground stained even the stone. Ethan rose, bleeding, furious, changed. His eyes were white. His veins pulsed with light. His body burned from the inside out. Something roared within him. And for the first time, he understood. It wasn't just survival. It was instinct. It was love, fused with pain. He raised his hand and triggered every dispersion crystal at once. The cave ceiling exploded in violet fire. The air trembled. The soldiers were slammed into the rock with a thunderous impact. Ethan rushed to Meliara, pulling her into his arms. "Stay with me. Look at me." "I can't see," she whispered. "The pain, it's not physical. I'm getting you out of here. Ethan, you healed me. What you did, no one else would have." He held her tightly. Behind them, the last soldier stepped back, slowly, as if it understood something had been born there that couldn't be fought. Not with weapons, not with orders, not with logic. Hours later, deeper in the mine, Ethan sealed the walls with activated crystals. Meliara lay still, pale. The wound had stopped bleeding, but it still burned. He lay beside her, touched her face. "We're going to survive, and then we're going to live." She gave a weak smile. "You're not human anymore, and you're not alone anymore." The world outside was still frozen, but deep beneath the earth, two beings fused by choice and war were still alive, and that, in that moment, was enough. 2 days passed without another attack. In the makeshift shelter deep inside the mine, the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of impending death, but of a fragile truce. Ethan cared for Meliara with gentle hands, cleaning her wounds with warm meltwater, taking turns on watch while her body healed, not just through tech, but through presence. She woke on the third day, her breathing steady. "It feels warmer here," she murmured. "Or maybe you're just too alive to notice," he said with a tired smile. She looked at him, for the first time, with real tenderness. "It's not just my physiology that's changed. Something inside me has quieted." Ethan leaned in. "Maybe that's because you finally have a home." She frowned, confused. "A home, that's what we call it. When you stop running, when you choose to stay, even without knowing what tomorrow brings." Meliara touched his chest. There were markings there, faint violet veins beneath his skin like living tattoos. Her code was imprinted in him now, visible. "You're not human anymore. Still Ethan. Still yours." She smiled, more with her eyes than her lips. "Then maybe I found more than a home." In the days that followed, they cleaned up the wreckage from the attack. The mine still had hidden tunnels, forgotten stockpiles from World War II, and Ethan repurposed them with military precision. They turned one into a new home. Rough, cold, but alive. One afternoon, while she was cataloging the remaining crystals, He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. The warmth between them was different now. Not urgent, but constant. "Are they coming back?" he asked. "Eventually. And when they do," she took a deep breath, "they won't find a defenseless exile anymore. They'll find two beings intertwined, something their algorithms can't predict." He turned her to face him. "Then we build. We live. We love. Until then." Meliara learned how to cook with Ethan. Crude, but it worked. He taught her the value of silence after a long day. She taught him how to really listen to the wind. Together, they began to see time not as a countdown, but as staying. A week later, Meliara said, "I feel something strange." He tensed. "Is it pain?" "No, it's light. Like something's growing inside me, but not something destructive." He stared at her. "A mutation?" "No, a possibility." She touched her belly, thoughtful. "Maybe the codes created more than we expected." Ethan was silent for a long moment, then simply said, "Whatever it is, it won't be alone." Outside, the snow was starting to melt. Spring, still shy, was brushing the frozen trees with fingers of sunlight. And deep in the heart of the mine, a new cycle had begun, not based on race or planet or logic, but on choice. Ethan's journal was old, bound in cracked leather, filled with notes from before the war. Maps, coordinates, survival math. Now, he was writing something entirely different. His hands trembled a little, not from the cold, but because writing about what he lived with Meliara felt like trying to describe a miracle using trench language. "My name is still Ethan Monroe, but everything else has changed." Across the mine, Meliara sat cross-legged, rearranging small communication crystals, trying to teach the baby, not confirmed, but already imagined, the frequencies of planet Earth. She was humming softly. It wasn't a song from her species, or his. It was one they made up, and he recognized it by ear. It had been born the day she nearly died for him. "I've seen the end creeping up more than once, but it never scared me like the emptiness of having no one to fight for. She saved me with pain. I saved her with choice. We weren't made to be together. But who says life follows the blueprint?" 1 month after the attack, the orbital ship from her species left Earth's orbit. There was no second strike. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of respect, or maybe because they had no idea how to handle what they'd accidentally created in trying to destroy it. A bond between two beings that should never have coexisted. But they did. And more than that, they loved. That night, lying under the mine's metal beams, Ethan asked, "If you could go back, would you choose a different planet?" Meliara looked in his eyes. She didn't answer right away, then simply said, "I'd choose to crash in the exact same place and freeze everything again if it meant finding you." He smiled. That was almost romantic. "I'm learning from you. It's working." She pulled him close, kissed his forehead, then his heart. "You're not human, not alien either. Then what am I? You're mine." Outside, the world was still hostile. Satellites still circled. Governments still schemed. Wars, big and small, still burned. But in a forest of ice and silence, two lives were rebuilding something where the impossible wasn't a threat, but a promise. And in the darkness of the mine, one last line in Ethan's journal closed the cycle. "We didn't survive. We chose to live, even when the universe said we shouldn't." 5 years later, the world had changed, but not enough to notice what had quietly taken root beneath the frozen Alaskan mountains. The mine had turned to forest. Where once there was rock and silence, now young trees grew in soil enriched by minerals no Earth scientists could name. The air was strangely gentler, the climate softer. At the center of it all stood a simple house. No fences, no gates, just wood, warmth, and light. And at the center of the house, a child. He had lilac eyes like his mother, but the sparkle in them was earthly. His laughter, completely human. The way he stumbled clumsily around the living room, tripping over his own feet and blurting out half alien gibberish, half curse words picked up from his dad, was living proof that the impossible had won. Ethan scooped him up with ease. His body was stronger now, not just because of the mutation still pulsing beneath his skin, but because since the moment he chose to live, he had something to grow stronger for every single day. Meliara appeared at the door, holding a small device in her hand. "The pod we buried, it stopped transmitting. Officially, We're dead. Ethan looked at her and smiled. Then maybe we can finally start living for real. She smiled back. Haven't we already been doing that for a while now? That night, after the child was asleep, they stepped out into the cold. But they didn't feel the cold at all. They touched foreheads, like they always did, and looked up at the sky. A falling star streaked across the heavens. Ethan made a wish, though he knew, deep down, he didn't need luck anymore. Maliara spoke. Do you think the universe will leave us alone? No. And still you stayed with me. He looked at her, touched the side of her face, where nearly invisible scars told their story. Staying with you wasn't some brave act. It was the only path where I still felt like myself. She placed her hand on his chest. And now, he said, now we keep going, one day at a time, together. Back in the cave where it all began, one final message was burned into the wall. Here, the impossible happened, and the world survived it. If this story touched you, if you've ever rooted for an impossible kind of love, subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more stories like this, about humans who love like no one else, and aliens who learn how to love back. Drop a comment below. Which part moved you the most? And tell us, would you risk everything for a love from another world?